One of the expectations is that I'm not an expert in either of these fields. I've just been working in them for most of my, in fact, all of my career, part and part, literally 50% was in customer service and 50% was in sales operations. All the views over here are my personal experiences and things that I feel are important and things that I have experienced as being important. So let's just start. And so I always like starting a slide with a quote, and I always find quotes are motivational in lots of ways. And while I was trying to think of this particular presentation, I was trying to understand what was important to me as a person, what was important from this presentation point of view. And I thought it made a lot of sense where it basically says, be fearless in the pursuit of what sets your soul on fire. And for me, I think this kind of covers most of my life, my attitude to life, my attitude to work. I strive to be fearless. It's something that I have to keep on telling myself to do. I have to keep on telling myself that, you can do it. I have to keep on saying that, it's all right to be scared, but you can still make an attempt. So I think being fearless is something that you have to talk yourself into or out of. And whether it's a pursuit of something that sets your soul on fire, basically it's passion for what you're doing. So I think for me, what sets my soul on fire has always been work, has always been family, and of course, friends. And I think all these three things are equally important to me in equal proportions, and sometimes one is more important than the other at particular stages of my life. So, sorry, gone a little too fast. Okay, so my introduction about me. And so coincidentally, when I was doing this slide, I realized that me part was the hardest to write about and was the hardest statement to kind of understand. So I very rarely talk about me, but I was trying to understand how to explain to people or how to explain to a set of women or a set of individuals who don't know anything about me. And I realized that for me, life has been a series of events, personal and professional, and they've impacted me in different ways. And when I talk about series of events, personal or professional, in fact, I was trying to recall what these series of events could be. And I think the first one that made an impact in my life was my 9th standard, not passing in my maths exam. And I remember having to go and explain to my father why I didn't pass. And then I went to him saying why I couldn't pass. And I think that was one of the first events where I had a conversation which made an impact in my life. Then, of course, the first time my father went, my father was in the Air Force, and when he went to the border to fight, there was another event that impacted me because it made me realize fear. It made me realize that there were lots of things I couldn't control. My mom talking to me for the first time as a woman, I think I must have been all of 18, and all of a sudden I was talking to my mom, and she was talking to me, and she was using these big words and big sentences, again made an impact in my life. Meeting my husband also was very, very impactful. I think it changed my life in lots of ways. It improved my life in lots of ways, and it made me realize lots of things about myself. And I also think of events in my life would be friends who I've known for years and years and years, who've been part of my life through all my most important occasions. And last but not least, the most important event in my life has been my kids. And again, these just seem to be very few because there are lots of other small events which I'm not able to recall. But I think for me, it's always been something that everything impacts me positively or negatively, but it makes me a strong person. So I think that's me, at least as an introduction. Family point of view, I've been married for 17 years with 2 boys, aged 11 and 8. And like I said, very important part of my life. From a work point of view, I have a total of 25 years of work experience. I started my career in guest relations in a hotel. And to be very honest, I always say my career or my work has been part design, part accident. The design part was that I wanted to work in the hotel because my grandfather was the general manager in one hotel, and it was something I aspired to do, so I did that. My second job, which was in Airtel, was an accident. A friend of mine said, let's go for a drive. And she took me for my job interview at Airtel. And I got the job, so it wasn't planned. Again, my third job in Dell was again by design because I took this job after I had my son. So I think most of my career, like I said, is part design, part accident, and it's worked out brilliantly. And next, let's kind of see. Okay, my career, yes, like I said, it's part design and part accident. What are the 5 things I've learned in my career? And first one is, of course, I think hard work pays. This is something that I learned basically from my father. My father was a fighter pilot in the Indian Air Force. For 30 years, he went and worked religiously every day. He left home at 7:30 and he came back home at 5 o'clock. And all the conversations I ever had with him was that work hard, and when you work hard, it pays. The long run, short run, or the mid run. So I think that's something that I've carried throughout my career, throughout my life, that you work hard eventually turns out well. Structure is important. This is one of the lessons I learned very early in my career, basically by making mistakes, by missing deadlines, and by getting fired. Not literally, but metaphorically, because I realized that when you're not structured in your life or not structured in your work, things tend to slip, and you invariably miss a lot of important things. A lot of small things that were not important become important because you didn't kind of, plan them or adhere to them as per requirement. The second thing is lead by example. This is another attribute that I learned again from family, and this again from my grandfather, where he was in the hotels. He believed whatever he wanted his juniors or his subordinates or his peers to do, he had to be able to do it himself. So when he said that you had to come in a crisp uniform to work, or your uniform had to be clean and ironed, he made sure his was. When he said that you had to come on your shift on time, he made sure he went in and work on time. So I think that was something again that was a very important learning for me. I lead by example, and I've always done that in my jobs. It's paid in a lot of ways. The fourth thing is network. I think it's silly to think that it does not matter or that it's not needed. A network is something that can be something that motivates you. It can also be something that grounds you. It can be with friends, it can be with family, and it can be with people from work or just people. I think a network is something that we all should look at, and not look at it only from a structural point of view, and then it kind of over-empowers you and you feel like, oh gosh, it's too much of hard work. I think it's everyone around you eventually becomes a network of sort. But what you need to understand is that what does that network do for you? So for example, if it's family, what is their role in your life, or what is your role in their life? Where do they contribute to you? Where do they add value to you? Where do they even maybe impact you negatively? But whatever it is, it's something for you to learn from, it's something for you to rely on, it's something for you to use. So I think network is very, very important. And the fifth is, of course, have role models. A role model is very, very important. Not to become the person who's your role model, but I think to learn and to realize that there are lots of parts of them that could make sense to you. So, for example, these are people, and I say people because doesn't have to just be one person. It can be multiple people. When how they do things, or how they think, or how they say things, or how they articulate things, you suddenly say, yes, I should have said it that way, or I should have done it that way. So I think role models are extremely important. And these are 5 things that I've kind of had somewhere along the way in my life. Most often than not, I've relied on them in various ways, and it's worked for me professionally. It's worked to quite an extent for me even personally. So then the big question is customer service or sales operations, and I think I chose these 2 things because these are 2 things that I've done in my professional life. So like I said, for the first 10 years I was in customer service, and the next 10 years, which is currently now, I'm in sales operations. I think one of the things that I like about both these things is that you must enjoy what you do, and it has to be slow and steady. So I think these are 2 things that have worked for me with these 2 career paths that at least I selected. Why would customer service or sales operations work for you? Now, when I say you, I'm ad-libbing over here by making an assumption that you all want to do something like this, but this is something that I did, and something that I'm going to talk about are things that worked for me in both these roles. So it's organized and structured. So customer care by definition is an organized and structured department. It's an organized and structured way of doing things. There's a lot of comfort in the fact that even if you're handling a call center, or you're handling a retention department, or you're handling a query resolution department, there is a way of doing it. There's a method to it. It gives you there's a lot of strength and a lot of comfort in the fact that it's something that someone has already set for you and you can improve upon, or there's something that people have done differently. So from my point of view, the fact that it's organized and structured helps. It's like, for example, I think both these functions or both these jobs are like planning a wedding or a holiday. If you can do those, and I'm not being fanciful over here, I'm just saying that it's literally, if you plan how to do it, it follows a path. It makes life easier. There's no thing that's saying I cannot do a role in customer service, because there are multiple roles. So there are roles where you can lead a team. There are roles where you can take calls. There are roles where you can write an email. There are roles where you can solve problems. There are roles where you can improve processes. There are roles where you can do training on improving processes. So I think from a point of view, these are jobs where you can go and start or restart or get into something and feel that I don't know, I don't not know anything, because it's easy to learn. And it's basically because the fact that it's organized and structured, and there's a precedent of how it's already been done. So it's not that you have to go and create something which eventually puts pressure back on you. So I think that's one of the first things that I like about both these roles. It's simple. And when I say simple, I don't mean the fact that the processes are not complicated, but I think from an output point of view. So in customer service, it's very clear. What is your goal? What do you need to do? You need to handle customer queries. You need to handle a customer escalation. You need to handle a customer request. The customer has a need, he or she calls you. If that need is answered or attended to, he or she invariably walks away feeling satisfied. And I'm using the word deliberately here, satisfied, because unless, of course, you go the extra mile with him or you do something extraordinary, then he's not delighted. But that's because I'm a customer care person, so I'm talking to you like that. But most of the functions in customer care are simple. They are not really complicated processes. They are processes. If you adhere to them, they work. And there is always a team to support. Most customer service is a team activity. It's not something that you usually do individually. Sales operation is to some extent also a team activity. The only difference is that in a sales operations part, you might be wholly and solely responsible for one part of the process or one aspect of the role of the job, and someone else is supporting something else, and then both will have to work together to make sure you achieve the same outcomes or results. So from that point of view, again, I find both these roles are comparatively simple in how it is portrayed or how it is done. And these are team roles basically, so they're not really individual roles. Team role sometimes makes a lot more sense, especially if you're restarting or you're thinking of restarting. So that's what I feel. The third part is teamwork. And I think both of these roles, teamwork is important. So if you are somebody who is comfortable being a part of a team, it works brilliantly. Sales operations can have a mix of both, where sometimes you have to take the lead, sometimes you have to just take a step back and let someone else do something and see how it works out. So I think from a teamwork perspective, it's very important. It matters in both these roles. Being transparent with your team and supporting them in whichever capacity that you can, it works. It has to be in that point of view. So if you are again somebody who is not wanting to go and shake the world up, but wants to kind of conquer it, little by little or piece by piece, then these are roles that kind of help you do that, and it also helps you set, the context. So when you're going in in a team role, or a role that has a lot of people in it, or has a lot of functioning parts to it, you know for a fact that you are secure and you have got that learning curve which helps over here. So I think from a teamwork perspective, from a team point of view, both these roles are brilliant from that point. The fourth piece, and I think I know when I wrote this, for me it's always been about logical thinking. Whenever someone's come to me with a problem or with a complaint or with a request or with a ask, it's always been what's the logical approach to it, or how do you rationalize it? And I think when I was trying to kind of think of how to explain this to you all, I was trying to think of how one reacts to a customer or to a stakeholder. And a customer, if it's customer care job, and if it's a sales operation, then it's a stakeholder. The stakeholder very specifically being sales over here. How well you can do your job with these two parts, where customers or stakeholders. Why do they want to change things? Because from a point of view where your customer comes to you or your stakeholder comes to you and says, listen, change this, you have to be logical of why are they asking for it. And then when you understand that, is it logical or a logical conclusion for you to change it? So I think for both these jobs, being logical is very important. And of course, it has to have a practical application. So logic might work where, 2 + 2 is equal to 4. But is the application practical? Does the application require so much of effort that it doesn't make sense, or does it require too little effort, or does it require a complicated change in the whole process where then it becomes impractical to change that process? So I think both these two go hand in hand for both these roles. And 9 times out of 10, I find when you go back to stakeholders or to customers and try and understand why they are asking for something, what is the impact to them, what is the impact to the company, is it beneficial to give it to them? And because in the short term it doesn't really impact the company, but in the long term it does. So I think all these thought processes are very important, and it makes a lot of sense in both these roles. Logical thinking and a practical application, or logical thinking with a practical application, both have to kind of work hand in hand, because both these roles require you to do things. Both these roles require you to change processes. Both these roles require you to talk to customers, talk to stakeholders, and your stakeholders eventually also a customer of yours. So from that point of view also, it's extremely important. The next one that I want to talk about is one of my favorites, and I think this is why both my roles, both my jobs kind of excite me, is that it's a process, which means that one has to manage and improve or change it. So both roles are very clearly process oriented, they're process driven, they're very, like I said, they have structures around them. There's always been someone who's done the role before you. There's been someone who's set up steps or set up rules and regular rules of engagement, because at that time it made sense. Now you can be the kind of person who decides to just follow those rules and still do your job really, really well, or you can go and change some of those processes, keeping in mind that there are new pieces of information. So both these roles are very clearly around process. They're very clearly around managing the process, changing the process, or improving the process. And again, like I said, there's a lot of comfort and there's a lot of clarity, in fact, that you have to just run with the same thing, or decide or put pressure back on yourself to say, okay, I want to change something, and I want to change this because this is the reason it needs to change, because the impact to my customer is going to be much more, my impact to my stakeholders is going to be much more. So from that point of view, it's just makes sense to be structured. And I think from my point of view, all the points that I have mentioned again follow a sequence, right? Both these roles demand you that they are organized and they are structured. So that means you have to be organized and you have to be structured. They are, one second, sorry. My apologies. They are, you have to, the processes as such, or the jobs as such are simple, but you have to know, what the teams do, what you do, what you can and can't do. They also have to be they rely very heavily on teamwork. So there are teams that support you, there are teams around you that will engage with you. And again, it works where if you are in a position or in a stage of your life where you are wanting to start slow and then kind of run ahead. customer care, or at least customer service, can be jobs where you can start at literally, maybe not at entry level, but you can start really, really simple. And like I said, you can start as a lead. You can start as owning a particular process. You can start from a training perspective. You can, look at, qualitative, content management, because most service-oriented jobs have where you're talking to customers or you're writing to customers. So people are very conscious of scripts. They're very conscious of FAQs. So there are a lot of things that you can do from a customer service point of view. A sales operation is a little more stressful in the sense is because it's dealing with sales and because it's more real time. You are tasked to handle projects and you're tasked to handle programs. So then you invariably own them end to end, but that has its own charm in the sense is that if you are at this point of your life where you've planned, saying that, yes, I've balanced my personal life and I've balanced my work life, I mean my family life, and I can go and maybe concentrate and give 5 hours or 6 hours a day to my work, then project management or handling projects is not a difficult task. So I think both of these make sense in different ways depending on which path or which stage of your lives that you all are in specifically. So I think what I would say as takeaways from both these roles is that always ask for clarifications, ask for information, ask for time. There's no harm in asking for information. There's no harm in asking for extra insights. And there are, like I said, there are people around who know the roles, who've done the roles, who are experts at the roles. So utilize that and reach out to people and ask them. The other thing is be open to new ideas within both these roles. It's very important that while I can follow a process that has been set and continue to do that, I also have to be open that people are coming up to me and saying, listen, let's try and do it differently. Let's do it this way. So be open to those ideas, but again, at the end of the day, if you own the process or if you own the job or you own that part of the program, then you have to understand what does it entitle, how much of the work makes sense from a practical application point of view, right? The other thing in both these roles that I have realized is can't does not exist. I have still come across a leader or a senior or a boss who says, if I go and say it can't be done, they look at me and say, okay, fine. It doesn't exist. You have to find solutions. You have to find ways of doing things. You have to find different ways of doing things. So these are three things that, at least some of the things that I think are important, and I've utilized them very, very religiously in my careers. I've utilized them with most of my managers and with most of my colleagues and most of my peers. So I think this is what I have to say. And yeah, I think so that's it. I know I'm a little fast, but I hope it was informative. And if there are any questions, or how would you, let me go back to, so if there are any questions on the from anybody?